Hey friends, Julie Cross here. Giddy up. I've got my cowboy hat on. I wanted to share some learnings and reflections and analogies from our horse riding adventure that we went on earlier this year. Often, so much of the value comes after you've done it as well as during it, where you get to reflect on it and the lessons that you learned along the way. And I have to say I'm a real reflector when it comes to things like that. I spend a lot of time in reflection and remembering and then drawing out the lessons for me, and that's growth then. That's our ability to grow, to be able to do that, to reflect and then grow through it. So I wanted to share them with you because I thought you might get something from it. So, I'm not a horse rider. I don't ride horses regularly. I grew up in the bush, and sure, we sort of, had a couple of horse rides growing up, but it's not a regular thing I do. So not a lot of preparation for this trip, and sometimes with certain jobs that we get pushed into or with life situations, you don't get a lot of preparation. So you make sure you got the standard equipment. I mean, you do follow your list and kind of make sure you got the standard equipment that you need. And I guess the story really begins before we even got there. So we stayed in Jindabyne, and we were going up to the Snowy Mountain River area the next morning. And so the night before, we knew that we could take wine for a night around the fire. Very important to make sure. I mean, I did make a phone call before I left to check with them that we could actually cool our champagne, that we did have an esky to cool champagne, and then I realised I probably should ask something about riding boots or something. So some preparation had been done. And so we were in the Jindabyne bottle shop buying our wine, and we were walking around, a group of us girls, and getting what we want. And I had watched a few of the videos of the horse riding trip, so I was familiar with Justin, the guy that ran them, from the videos. And so next thing I turn around and there's this man standing there, and I'm like looking at him and he's looking at me, and I go, "You're Justin." I say, "We're coming horse riding with you tomorrow." And so he told the story the next night around the campfire, how this wild woman was wandering around the bottle shop making all this noise, and next thing he said, she's looking at me, telling me she's coming horse riding with me. But the point being there is that the bond was already made. I'd reached out. I could have ignored him and I could have snuck around and said, "Oh, I think that's him." But me being bold and the way I am, I reached out immediately, said, "Oh, I can't wait to sort of do horse riding with you." And the truth is that I'd read some feedback on TripAdvisor that hadn't painted him in a really nice light. So I could have gone in defensive, but instead I'm going in there thinking, no, you're going to be great for us. I know for sure we're all going to get on great and you're going to be terrific. And so I went with that attitude and bonded with him immediately in the bottle shop and said, "We're excited to be coming with you. We're getting our supplies." And immediately it was done. There was kind of a connection formed with us, the group, and him. And so that was the first lesson. And then the next day we went up there. So reach out to people, reach out and make the connection. Be the one to put your hand out. And so the next day morning we go up and we hire our boots and we do the paperwork, which is always part of the process. And then we go and meet the rest of our team, which are our horses. Now I had Fast Eddie, and there was Mustang Sally, and there was a variety of horses. And so I meet my horse, and the first thing you've got to do is brush your horse. So you see, this horse and I are now forming a team. We're going to work very closely together as a team. And it's important that we bond and we get to know each other. And that's important if we're leading team members and introducing a new team member into our team. We've got to facilitate that process. So that was part of why we were in charge of brushing our horses and saddling our horses up. We have to get to know our equipment that we're working with. We have to get to know our process, and we have to build a bond of trust between each other because we'll be working so closely. Because there are times when you're horse riding that you've got to let the horse kind of, take the lead a little bit, and you've got to learn to flow with it. There are times that you've got to take control and make sure that the horse is following your lead. And so you've got to get to know each other. So we did that, and then we all kind of get on, and Justin is our leader in this situation, so he's coming out with this on his horse, and he's chosen his horse that he's working with, which is a horse called Banjo. Now we would find out during this trip and in reflection, Banjo wasn't the best choice, I would say, to bring out on this trip, because Banjo, he had a lot of horses he could choose from, so a lot of teammates that he could have brought with him, but he brought Banjo, and Banjo was a horse that had quite an attitude. Banjo actually didn't like any of the other horses, so the minute a horse got beside it, Banjo would nip it, which isn't good for the rider. And so Banjo wasn't a team player, and so Banjo definitely wasn't the best horse, and more on that later. But the first day, even though we'd told Justin our various levels of riding skill and experience, he had to get to know that for himself as a leader. So he gave us some general overview about the horse and, about riding in that particular country, because although we might have ridden, we might not have ridden in that particular country where there were lots of steep ascents and steep descents. So he gave us some tips about that. So when we're going up a hill, we would have to lean forward and assist the team member, assist the horse in going up the hill, because they would have quite a big effort to get up some of this country. And so that would be you helping would be to lean forward. There were times, and same in life, sometimes you've got to lean into it for the tough climbs. And then when we're going down the hill, you had to lean right back and kind of just get into the flow and the movement with the horse, where you could kind of, still hang on, but enjoy the journey a little more and trust the horse, and knew what it had to do, and that you were just coming along on the journey. And so it is with life. Sometimes when we're going down, we can really just enjoy the view, and we're just cruising a little bit here. And so that was one of a couple of things that we got out of that. And then as the trip went on, and Justin would know our styles, etc., we kind of got a little bit more adventurous, and so we did sort of bush bashing, and he put us in. We did a bit of cantering, and there were a few different situations that we were put in. We went up and had a look at some brumbies, and then a brumby came charging at me on my horse, so my horse started, and then Justin kind of rode in between and became the hero. And that's what a leader should do. A leader's got to do that sometimes to protect his team members from oncoming things that are going to challenge them or that may harm them. And so he did a great job of that. And then there was another time where he would say to us about keeping the horses in a line, so that going up a hill or what have you, because these horses would want to take off up a hill, and sometimes when he wasn't sure we were experienced enough, the thing was that you stayed in the line, because then the horses would stay behind the other horse. But this particular day, one of the horses broke out of the line, which means all of the horses then just all took off, and I'm hanging off a deal. I've got thrown around like this and just hanging on, but I did trust past Eddie, and he got me there, and somehow we got to the top of the hill. But Justin being at the front, and because Banjo was hard to handle, he never realised any of this was going on at the back. So in a way, we were kind of left to it. But that was kind of okay too. We got out of it okay, and it was fine. But it just was a great analogy too of what happens when someone breaks out of the focus of the group, of doing, of our values and our mission. When somebody kind of breaks out, that it can create a fair bit of havoc within amongst the team and with everybody else. And it does require sometimes everyone just hanging on for dear life, but it kind of can be exciting as well. And so there was kind of that analogy too. And then there was another day where we were going through bushland, and it was quite again where you had to really hang on and really focus and trust your horse and be aware of where your legs were so they weren't getting hit by trees, etc. So a lot of focus in a lot of areas, working closely with your horse. But then my horse's harness, they have a rope harness on, and the harness came loose. Probably because I didn't tie it properly, and then it was flapping around Fast Eddie's face. So he was spooking all the time. So he's spooking. And I'm not sure knowing what to do, and I'm thinking it's going to bark, and I'm trying to pull him up, but I was pulling up high, and then Justin yells at me and says, pull down, he's going to bark, and I'm stressed. But you see, what was happening was that Justin couldn't get off his horse because Banjo was playing up too. So he couldn't, his horse was taking up all his attention. So his ability to be a good leader to the rest of us was compromised. And so you've got to be careful who you're surrounding yourself with closely, who we're hiring to stand with us and work closely with us, because if they're requiring all our attention, then we're forgetting about the rest of the team, and that's not always a great thing. And so it took a while for him to get Banjo under control, for him to be able to come and help me. And I'm the less experienced person. So we've got to be aware of those moments as well. And another great lesson was on the way home. So as we're heading home, horses, once they know they're heading home, they want to just go. It's what they do. It's what, once we know we're heading home in the afternoon, we just want to go too. So these horses, once they knew that it was time for home, they were jumpy. They were out there. So it took a lot more control from us to keep ourselves safe and to keep them under control. And so Justin being the leader, once again, we just noticed that he was taking off right down the front through this bush area, and we were losing him. He was going so far ahead, and I thought, I wonder what he's doing, because then all the other horses start speeding up, and then it was just two of us left kind of behind, and our horses are now in panic. And so when a team member can't see where you're heading anymore, and they feel like they've left out all on their own, they can become a bit disorientated and not know what to do, and it just becomes panic that's kind of not very productive, and that's kind of where we were at. And so I was just pretty much left hanging on, so was my girlfriend Kath, hanging on through this bush, just hoping that we're going to be safe, wondering, well, how are we going to make these horses stop, because they just didn't want to stop. We ended up jumping over a log, and all this sorts of stuff went on. So it was quite fun as well, but a little bit scary. And when we kind of got to the end, we were a bit like, well, why did you all take off? Because we were in a bit of a situation back there. But what we realised was it was because, once again, Banjo was out of control and Justin wasn't able to control him. So definitely not the best team member to bring on a trip like that. But it created a bit of excitement for us and everyone survived. So it's okay in reflection. But just these are the sorts of analogies that we got out of it. And, when we got back and we brushed our horses for the last time and realised what a great, an amazing bonding experience it was, and how much you'd become to rely on these horses, and when they did such hard work getting up these hills where they were just sweating and puffing, and you almost wanted to hop off, such was our bond, to make it easier for them and help them get up. You almost wanted, at one stage there, you just felt like you need to carry them. And so such was the bond that we all developed with our horses. And I mean, there's so much more I could go on, but it would be such a long video. But I also know that in a situation like that, sitting around the campfire at night and doing a debrief and having laughter and finding the funny side of things, and noticing when my girlfriend fell off at one stage, she won't go into that, and I'm laughing. I know I'm laughing. Not good teamwork, but we made sure she was all right eventually, and she was. But lots of wonderful reflections and such soul nurturing experiences, and being out in Mother Nature and the smell. I mean, I grew up around cattle and horses, and the smell of them brings me back to my childhood. So, challenge yourself with those sorts of adventures. It is just so good for the soul to do those sorts of things in such beautiful countryside, and being immersed in Mother Nature, sitting around campfires at night, retelling all of what everybody got out of the day and sharing reflections. Just such great stuff. Giddy up! I'll be back for the next adventure. See ya.